I'm Brielle Martinez, 28 years old, and I'll never forget standing alone on that Harvard Business School stage, clutching my MBA diploma while scanning empty seats where my parents should have been. Around me, families erupted in cheers, cameras flashed, and graduates hugged their loved ones. But my section remained vacant because my parents had chosen my younger brother's high school baseball game over my graduation ceremony. They said his game was more important than my just another piece of paper. Little did they know. 5 years later, my penthouse would be splashed across every major newspaper. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and ultimate triumph, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and if you're ready for a tale of revenge served ice cold, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this journey is about to get intense. Trust me. You won't want to miss what happens when success becomes the sweetest revenge. Growing up in Sacramento, California, I was the oldest of three children in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family. My father worked as a mid-level manager at an insurance company, and my mother taught elementary school. On the surface, we looked like the perfect American family, but underneath lay a toxic dynamic that would shape my entire relationship with success and family loyalty. My younger brother Jake, now 23, had been the golden child since the day he could throw a baseball. Every dinner conversation revolved around his latest sports achievement. Every weekend was dedicated to his games and tournaments, and every family photo featured him front and center in his various team uniforms. My parents treated his athletic pursuits like they were training the next Derek Jeter, spending thousands on private coaching, expensive equipment, and travel teams that took us across 3 states for tournaments. Meanwhile, my academic achievements were treated as baseline expectations rather than celebrations. When I brought home straight-A report cards, my mother would glance at them briefly and say things like, "Well, that's what we expect from you, Brielle. You've always been the smart one." But when Jake managed to scrape together a C average while maintaining his starting position on the varsity team, my parents would take him out for celebratory dinners and buy him new gear as rewards. My younger sister Chloe, 25 now, initially seemed like my natural ally in this unbalanced family dynamic. She was artistic and creative, often overlooked just like me, though not to the same extent. We would spend hours in her room, drawing and talking about how unfair our parents were to Jake, making plans for when we'd both be successful and independent. I thought she understood the pain of being overshadowed, but I would later discover that her resentment was directed more at my achievements than at our parents' favoritism toward Jake. The pattern became more pronounced during high school. While I was earning National Merit Scholar recognition, being accepted to prestigious summer programs, and receiving full scholarship offers from multiple universities, my parents were focused entirely on Jake's baseball recruitment process. They hired a professional scout consultant, created highlight reels, and drove hundreds of miles to showcase events. When I was named valedictorian of my high school class, they missed the awards ceremony because it conflicted with one of Jake's playoff games. The Harvard Business School graduation snub wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of 28 years of systematic dismissal. When I called to tell them about my acceptance to one of the world's most prestigious MBA programs, my mother's first response was to ask if the program would interfere with my ability to help Jake with his college applications. When I graduated summa cum laude from UCLA with my undergraduate degree, they attended but spent the entire celebration dinner talking about Jake's batting average and his chances of making his college team. The day of my MBA graduation, I had specifically requested that they attend. I explained how much it meant to me, how hard I had worked, and how this degree represented the culmination of years of sacrifice and dedication. I even offered to pay for their flights and hotel accommodations. But when Jake's high school coach scheduled a crucial playoff game for the same weekend, my parents didn't hesitate to choose his game over my graduation ceremony. "Honey, you'll understand when you have kids of your own," my mother had said over the phone. "Jake's game is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He's being scouted by college coaches, and this could determine his entire future. Your graduation is just a ceremony. You'll get your diploma whether we're there or not." The casual dismissal of my achievement, the implication that my success was somehow less meaningful or impactful than a high school baseball game, cut deeper than any previous slight. I sat in that graduation ceremony, surrounded by empty chairs, watching other families celebrate their children's accomplishments, and I made a decision that would change everything. I decided that I would become so successful, so undeniably accomplished, that they would have no choice but to acknowledge my worth. After the ceremony, when my classmates were taking photos with their families and going out for celebratory dinners, I returned alone to my small apartment and began planning my future. I researched the most competitive companies in finance, studied for additional certifications, and started building a network that would help me climb higher than anyone in my family had ever imagined possible. The isolation I felt that day wasn't just about missing my graduation. It was about recognizing that my own family saw me as a supporting character in Jake's story, rather than the protagonist of my own life. They expected me to be grateful for their minimal attention, to understand that my accomplishments were simply what smart kids do, while Jake's mediocre athletic performance was treated like Olympic-level achievement. When I called them that evening to tell them about the job offers I had received, my father's response was to ask if any of the companies were located near Jake's college so I could attend his games and help him with his studies. The expectation that I would structure my entire career around supporting my brothers' continued mediocrity was the final straw in a lifetime of being treated as secondary. That night, I realized that breaking free from this dynamic would require more than just moving away or achieving personal success. It would require building a life so impressive, so undeniably remarkable, that they would be forced to confront their treatment of me. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted their recognition that they had vastly underestimated and mistreated their most accomplished child. Within 3 months of graduation, I had landed a position at Goldman Sachs in their investment banking division, starting at a salary that exceeded my father's annual income by $40,000. The work was demanding, often requiring 80-hour weeks and constant travel, but I thrived in the competitive environment. While my Harvard classmates were settling into comfortable corporate positions, I was determined to accelerate my career trajectory beyond anything they could imagine. My first-year performance reviews were exceptional. I closed deals that seasoned analysts struggled with, built relationships with clients that resulted in significant new business, and demonstrated an intuitive understanding of market dynamics that impressed even the most skeptical senior partners. By my second year, I was handling portfolios that most associates weren't trusted with until their fourth or fifth year in the company. However, my family's response to my success was not celebration but expectation of financial support. The first demand came 6 months into my new job, when my father called with what he presented as a reasonable request. Jake had been accepted to several colleges, but the one with the best baseball program was private and expensive. The annual tuition was $60,000, and while they had saved some money for his education, they were short by about $30,000 per year. "We know you're doing well at that fancy job of yours," my father said during a phone call that I initially thought was to check on how I was adjusting to life in New York. "And we've always been proud of how smart and successful you are. Jake's got this incredible opportunity, but we need some help making it happen. We figure with your salary, $30,000 a year wouldn't be too much of a burden for you." The casual assumption that I would subsidize my brother's education, the same brother whose athletic pursuits had overshadowed my academic achievements for decades, was infuriating. But what made it worse was the way my father presented it, as if I owed them this support, as if my success was somehow a family resource rather than the result of my individual effort and sacrifice. "Dad, I'm not going to pay for Jake's college," I said firmly. "I worked hard to earn scholarships for my own education, and he can do the same. There are academic scholarships available, and if baseball is as important as you've always said, he can earn an athletic scholarship." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for nearly 30 seconds before my father exploded. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? We supported you through school, we encouraged your education, and now that you're successful, you won't help your own brother? What kind of selfish person have you become?" The irony of being called selfish by people who had spent my entire life prioritizing one child's interests over another's was not lost on me. I reminded him of every missed achievement ceremony, every dismissed accomplishment, every time they had chosen Jake's activities over acknowledging my success. But my father dismissed these concerns as petty grievances and hung up on me. Within days, I began receiving calls from extended family members who had clearly been given a very different version of the story. My aunt called to express disappointment in my selfishness. My grandmother left a voicemail about how family should stick together. Even family friends from Sacramento reached out to suggest I reconsider my harsh decision. Chloe called a few days later, and I initially hoped she might be reaching out to offer support or at least understand my position. Instead, she launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about how I had forgotten my roots and become too good for my own family. She accused me of being obsessed with money and status, while ignoring the people who had always loved and supported me. "You act like Mom and Dad did something terrible by missing your graduation," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of righteous indignation that only comes from someone who believes they occupy the moral high ground. "But you're willing to destroy Jake's future over some petty revenge. Do you know how that makes you look to everyone who knows our family?" The conversation revealed that my parents had been systematically contacting our extended family and community, painting me as a successful but heartless daughter who had abandoned her family's values in pursuit of wealth and status. They had carefully omitted any mention of their decades of favoritism, their dismissal of my achievements, or their assumption that my success should automatically benefit Jake's continued mediocrity. But my refusal to fund Jake's college education was only the beginning of the conflict. As my career continued to accelerate and my income grew substantially, the requests became more frequent and more demanding. My mother called asking for help with credit card debt that she claimed had accumulated due to supporting Jake's training and equipment costs. My father suggested I should contribute to a family vacation that would allow them to visit colleges with Jake and properly support his decision-making process. Each request was presented as a reasonable expectation from successful family member, but the underlying assumption remained the same. My achievements existed to benefit their priorities rather than my own goals. When I continued to refuse these requests, the family narrative shifted from disappointment to active hostility. By my third year at Goldman Sachs, I had been promoted twice and was earning bonuses that exceeded many people's annual salaries. I had also begun investing in real estate, starting with a small condo in Brooklyn that I renovated and sold for a significant profit. My investment portfolio was growing rapidly, and I was building the kind of wealth that would provide long-term financial security. But rather than celebrating these achievements, my family's resentment was intensifying. Jake had eventually enrolled in a state school where he made the baseball team as a walk-on, but his athletic performance was mediocre at best. Meanwhile, Chloe had graduated from a local college with an art degree and was struggling to find stable employment in her field. The contrast between my rapid professional ascent and their more traditional post-graduation challenges created additional tension. The breaking point came during a family gathering for my grandmother's 80th birthday, which I attended hoping to maintain some connection with extended family members who might be more reasonable than my immediate family. Throughout the evening, my parents made pointed comments about my expensive clothes, my new car, and my apparent unwillingness to share the blessings with family members who had supported me. When my uncle asked about my work, my father interrupted to explain that I was too busy making money to care about family anymore. When my grandmother mentioned how proud she was of my success, my mother added that success without family loyalty was hollow and meaningless. The systematic undermining of my achievements in front of relatives who had known me since childhood was humiliating and infuriating. After dinner, my parents cornered me in the kitchen and delivered what they clearly considered their final ultimatum. Either I would begin contributing significantly to family expenses, including Jake's remaining college costs and a down payment for Chloe's future home purchase, or they would make sure everyone in our extended family and community understood what kind of person I had become. "You can choose to be part of this family or you can choose your money," my mother said, her voice cold and calculating. "But you can't have both. We're not going to pretend everything is fine while you ignore your responsibilities to the people who raised you." Looking back, that moment represented a crucial turning point. I could have given in to their demands, could have begun the process of financially subsidizing their expectations and maintaining some version of family harmony. But I realized that doing so would mean accepting their fundamental premise that my success belonged to them rather than to me. Instead, I made a decision that would escalate the conflict far beyond anything I had anticipated. I told them that I would not be contributing to Jake's education, Chloe's home purchase, or any other family expenses, and that if they continued to spread lies about my character to our extended family, I would begin sharing the truth about their decades of favoritism and manipulation. That decision would prove to have consequences far more severe than I had imagined, but it also represented the moment I chose my own dignity over their approval. It was the beginning of a war that would ultimately expose truths about my family that I had never suspected and would force me to fight for my reputation, my career, and my financial security in ways I never could have anticipated. My career trajectory continued its upward climb despite the family turmoil. At 26, I became the youngest vice president in my division's history, a promotion that came with a substantial salary increase, equity participation, and recognition as one of the firm's rising stars. The financial press began mentioning my name in articles about young executives to watch, and I was invited to speak at industry conferences about innovative investment strategies. However, my family's campaign to pressure me into submission was intensifying in ways I had not anticipated. 2 weeks after my promotion was announced in the company newsletter, I received a frantic call from my assistant informing me that my parents had appeared at our office building's reception desk, claiming there was a family emergency that required my immediate attention. When I went downstairs to meet them, I discovered that their emergency was entirely fabricated. My mother had concocted an elaborate story about my father having chest pains and needing immediate financial assistance for medical treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. She produced what appeared to be medical documents and hospital bills, tearfully explaining that they had exhausted their savings and needed $10,000 within 24 hours to continue his treatment. The performance was convincing enough that several of my colleagues who witnessed the scene were genuinely concerned for my family's well-being, but I recognized the inconsistencies in their story immediately. My father appeared perfectly healthy. The medical documents contained obvious formatting errors, and the hospital they claimed had treated him was located in a city they had never visited. When I confronted them about the fraudulent documents in a conference room that I had hurriedly reserved, my mother's demeanor shifted dramatically. The tearful, desperate woman who had been pleading for help transformed into someone cold and calculating, explaining that they had invested significant time and money in raising me and deserved a return on that investment. "We didn't spend 18 years supporting your education so you could abandon your family," she said, her voice now devoid of the emotion she had displayed moments earlier. "You owe us, Brielle. And if you won't acknowledge that voluntarily, well, find other ways to make you understand your obligations." I asked them to leave immediately and informed building security that they were not authorized to visit me at work. But the damage to my professional reputation had already begun. My colleagues had witnessed what appeared to be a family crisis, followed by my apparent refusal to help my desperate parents. The rumors and speculation that followed were impossible to control completely, despite my attempts to explain the situation to close associates. The incident marked the beginning of a systematic campaign designed to damage my professional standing and force me to comply with their financial demands. Over the following months, they employed tactics that demonstrated a level of coordination and maliciousness that shocked me. Jake began calling my office pretending to be prospective clients, tying up my assistant's time and creating confusion about legitimate business opportunities. When these calls were traced back to his phone number, he claimed he was simply trying to understand what kind of work his sister did and had gotten confused about appropriate ways to contact me. More seriously, Chloe had begun contacting my colleagues and clients directly, sharing carefully crafted sob stories about how I had abandoned my struggling family despite my wealth and success. She would find their contact information through social media and professional networking sites, then reach out with messages expressing concern about my mental health and family relationships. These messages were sophisticated enough to appear legitimate, while being vague enough to avoid obvious defamation. She would write things like, "I'm worried about my sister Brielle and hope the stress of her family situation isn't affecting her work. Our parents are going through such a difficult time, and her refusal to help them is causing everyone a lot of pain. I hope you understand if she seems distracted or emotional lately." The cumulative effect of these contacts was significant damage to my professional relationships. Clients began questioning whether personal drama might affect my judgment or availability. Colleagues started treating me with a mixture of sympathy and wariness, unsure whether I was dealing with legitimate family problems or simply being unreasonable toward people who needed help. My direct supervisor called me into his office after receiving the third contact from family members expressing concern about my well-being. He explained that while the company didn't typically involve itself in personal matters, the repeated contacts from family members suggested that I might be dealing with issues that could affect my performance or judgment. "I'm not questioning your work quality, which has been exceptional," he said carefully. "But when family members are reaching out to express concerns about your mental state and your treatment of them, it raises questions about your stability and decision-making that I need to address with human resources." The meeting was humiliating and infuriating because it forced me to explain intimate family dynamics to professional colleagues who had no context for understanding the decades of manipulation and favoritism that had led to this conflict. I provided documentation of my parents' fraudulent medical bills and explained the pattern of their behavior, but I could see that the situation had already damaged my reputation within the firm. The harassment escalated further when my parents began appearing at company social events that were open to the public. Goldman Sachs frequently hosted networking events, charity fundraisers, and industry conferences that included guest lists extending beyond company employees. My parents somehow obtained information about these events and would attend uninvited, using the opportunity to approach my colleagues and share their version of our family conflict. At a charity gala where I was representing the firm's community investment initiative, my parents appeared and spent the evening telling other attendees about my refusal to help with my father's serious medical condition and Jake's destroyed college dreams. They positioned themselves as heartbroken parents whose successful daughter had abandoned her family values in pursuit of material wealth. The evening became a professional nightmare, as colleagues and clients approached me with expressions of sympathy for my family's struggles and gentle suggestions that perhaps I should reconsider my position. Several major clients mentioned that they hoped I would be able to resolve my family situation because it seemed to be causing everyone significant distress. By the end of the evening, I realized that my family's campaign was not just about extracting money from me. It was about systematically destroying my professional reputation and social standing until compliance with their demands became my only option for maintaining my career. The situation reached a crisis point when Jake contacted my largest client directly, claiming to be calling on behalf of our family's financial advisor to discuss concerns about my judgment and spending patterns. He told them that the family was worried about my mental health because I was making irrational financial decisions and refusing to help family members in crisis. The client, a pension fund that represented nearly 15% of my managed assets, called an emergency meeting to discuss their concerns about my stability and decision-making capacity. The meeting required me to bring documentation proving my mental competency and financial responsibility, effectively treating me like someone who had displayed signs of impairment or instability. Although I was ultimately able to convince the client that my family's claims were false, the incident required involving the company's legal department and human resources team in what had become a clear case of harassment and defamation. The time and energy required to address these constant attacks was affecting my ability to focus on my work and pursue new business opportunities. I realized that my initial assumption that setting boundaries and refusing their demands would eventually lead to acceptance of my position had been naive. Instead, my family had doubled down on their efforts to control me, employing tactics that threatened not just my comfort, but my entire career and financial future. The stakes of the conflict had escalated far beyond family disagreements about money. They were now engaged in systematic efforts to destroy my professional reputation and financial security, gambling that the damage to my career would eventually force me to comply with their demands for financial support. It was becoming clear that this conflict would not end with compromise or mutual understanding. My family had chosen to treat my success as their property, and my refusal to share it as an act of theft that justified any retaliation they could devise. The war they had declared would require me to fight back with tactics and determination that matched their willingness to destroy everything I had worked to build. During this escalating conflict, two people emerged as crucial allies who would help me navigate the increasingly complex challenges my family was creating. The first was Sarah Williams, a senior partner at Goldman Sachs, who had built her career during an era when professional women faced even greater obstacles and family pressures than they do today. Sarah had observed the harassment I was experiencing and recognized patterns she had seen in other successful women whose families treated their achievements as collective property rather than individual accomplishments. Sarah requested a private meeting where she shared her own experiences with family members who had attempted to exploit her success for their own benefit. Her father had pressured her to fund her siblings' business ventures. Her mother had expected her to support extended family members financially, and various relatives had assumed that her wealth obligated her to solve everyone else's problems. "What your family is doing is a form of financial abuse," Sarah explained during our conversation in her office. "They're using emotional manipulation, professional sabotage, and social pressure to control your behavior and extract money from you. It's not about family loyalty or obligation, it's about exploitation and control." Sarah's guidance was invaluable not just for the emotional support but for the practical strategies she had developed to protect herself from similar manipulation. She recommended specific lawyers who specialized in family harassment cases, helped me document the pattern of interference with my professional responsibilities, and advised me on how to communicate with clients and colleagues about the situation without appearing unprofessional or defensive. The second crucial ally was Diego Rodriguez, a building contractor I met during the renovation of a Brooklyn condo I had purchased as an investment property. Diego was renovating the unit above mine, and we struck up conversations during the months our projects overlapped. Unlike most people in my professional circle, Diego had no connection to finance or corporate culture, which made him an ideal confidant for discussing family dynamics without worrying about professional implications. Diego had grown up in a large family where financial success was rare, and he understood the complex pressures that successful individuals faced when their achievements created expectations among family members. His perspective was particularly valuable because he had maintained strong family relationships despite achieving significant business success, providing examples of how healthy families support rather than exploit their successful members. "In my family, when someone does well, everyone celebrates and supports them," Diego told me during one of our renovation planning meetings. "My success helps my family because I'm happy and stable, but they don't expect me to fund their lives or make their problems disappear. What your family is doing isn't about love or loyalty, it's about control and greed." Both Sarah and Diego helped me recognize that the guilt I felt about my family's accusations was not based on reasonable expectations, but on years of conditioning that had taught me to prioritize their needs over my own well-being. Their outside perspectives were crucial in helping me understand that setting boundaries with exploitative family members was not selfish but necessary for maintaining my mental health and professional success. However, while I was building these supportive relationships, the betrayals within my own family were becoming deeper and more sophisticated than I had realized. The discovery of Chloe's identity theft was the first indication that my family's actions had crossed from emotional manipulation into criminal behavior. I discovered the theft when I received a call from a credit card company asking about charges on an account I had never opened. The investigation revealed that Chloe had been using my social security number, employment information, and other personal details to open credit accounts in my name for over 2 years. She had accumulated nearly $50,000 in debt across multiple cards, using the money to fund her living expenses while pursuing her art career. The sophistication of the fraud suggested that she had been planning this theft for an extended period and had access to personal information that I had never knowingly shared with her. She had obtained copies of my employment verification letters, bank statements, and other documents that would have required either breaking into my apartment or gaining access to my personal files through deception. When I confronted Chloe about the theft, she initially denied any involvement, claiming that someone else must have stolen both our identities in an elaborate fraud scheme. But when I provided evidence that the credit applications had been filled out in her handwriting and that purchases had been made at stores near her apartment, she shifted to justifying the theft as a reasonable response to my selfishness. "You have more money than you know what to do with," she said during a phone conversation that I recorded on the advice of my lawyer. "Meanwhile, I'm struggling to pay rent and buy groceries while pursuing my art. You could have helped me voluntarily, but you chose to abandon your own sister. So I took what I needed, which is basically just a tiny fraction of what you make in a year." The casual way she dismissed identity theft as a justified response to my refusal to voluntarily support her lifestyle was shocking. But what made the betrayal even more painful was the discovery that my parents had been fully aware of Chloe's activities and had actively helped her obtain the personal information she needed to commit the fraud. During the investigation, I learned that Chloe had been staying at my parents' house frequently over the past 2 years, and that they had provided her with copies of family documents, including my social security card and birth certificate, which I had left in their house during college. They had also coached her on how to answer verification questions that credit companies might ask, using their knowledge of my personal history to help her impersonate me convincingly. When I confronted my parents about their role in the identity theft, they defended Chloe's actions as a desperate response to my unwillingness to help family members in need. My father actually argued that since I was family, my financial resources belonged to all of us, and taking money through credit fraud was no different than borrowing from a joint family account. "Chloe is your sister, and she needed help," my mother explained, as if the criminal nature of identity theft was irrelevant compared to family obligations. "You forced her into this situation by refusing to support her when she asked nicely. If you had been willing to help your own sister pursue her dreams, she never would have needed to take extreme measures." The discovery of the identity theft forced me to press criminal charges against my own sister, a decision that created additional professional and personal stress. The legal proceedings required extensive documentation, court appearances, and consultation with both criminal and civil attorneys. The time and energy required to address the theft was significant, but the alternative was allowing the fraud to continue and accepting financial responsibility for debts I had never incurred. The criminal charges against Chloe created a new dynamic in my family's harassment campaign. Rather than acknowledging that identity theft was a serious crime that justified legal consequences, they began portraying me as a vindictive sister who was using the legal system to destroy her own family member over a minor financial disagreement. Jake began telling people that I had destroyed Chloe's life over a small amount of money that I could easily afford to pay. My parents spread the story that I had pressed charges against my sister out of spite and revenge rather than because she had committed serious financial crimes against me. The narrative they created painted me as someone so obsessed with money that I was willing to send my own sister to jail to prove a point, but the identity theft was only the beginning of my family's criminal behavior. The investigation into Chloe's fraud led to the discovery that Jake had been attempting to claim me as a dependent on his tax returns, despite the fact that I provided no financial support for him and earned significantly more money than he did. The fraudulent tax claims could have created serious legal problems for me with the Internal Revenue Service and demonstrated that my entire family was willing to commit crimes to access my financial resources. The pattern of criminal behavior indicated that my family's harassment campaign was not an emotional response to feeling abandoned, but a coordinated effort to extract money from me through any means necessary. They had moved beyond manipulation and social pressure to actual fraud and theft, crimes that could have destroyed my career and financial stability if they had not been discovered and addressed promptly. The support I received from Sarah and Diego during this period was crucial for maintaining my emotional stability and professional focus. Without their guidance and encouragement, I might have been tempted to give in to my family's demands simply to end the constant stress and harassment. But their perspectives helped me understand that complying with criminals' demands would not end their exploitation, but would instead encourage them to escalate their criminal activities. The discovery of these crimes marked a turning point in the conflict. What had begun as a family disagreement about financial support had evolved into a criminal conspiracy designed to steal my identity, damage my credit, and exploit my financial resources through fraud. The people who had raised me and claimed to love me were willing to commit serious crimes against me, rather than accept that my success belonged to me rather than to them. By my 4th year at Goldman Sachs, my professional success had reached levels that attracted attention far beyond my immediate workplace. I had been promoted to managing director, making me one of the youngest people in the firm's history to reach that level. My annual compensation had reached $800,000 in salary plus performance bonuses that often exceeded my base pay, putting me in the top 5% of earners in the financial industry. More significantly, my investment portfolio had grown to include several real estate properties, a diversified stock portfolio, and alternative investments that were generating substantial passive income. The crown jewel of my real estate holdings was a penthouse apartment in a prestigious downtown Manhattan building that I had purchased for $1.8 million and spent 6 months renovating with Diego's help. The penthouse renovation had been featured in Architectural Digest as an example of how young professionals were reimagining urban living spaces. The article included photos of the stunning city views, the custom kitchen with Italian marble countertops, and the rooftop terrace that had become my favorite space for entertaining clients and friends. The publicity from the article had increased the property's value substantially, and real estate professionals were estimating its current worth at close to $2.8 million. However, my family's response to news of my success was not pride or celebration but renewed determination to claim ownership of what I had built. The first indication of their escalated schemes came when my parents suddenly began expressing interest in rebuilding our relationship after nearly 2 years of minimal contact following Chloe's arrest for identity theft. My mother called with what seemed like a genuine apology for the family's behavior over the past several years. She acknowledged that they had made mistakes in how they had treated me and expressed regret for the way the conflict had damaged our relationships. She mentioned that my grandmother had been asking about me constantly and that the family gatherings felt incomplete without me. We've all had time to think about what happened, and we realized that we handled everything wrong, my mother said during a conversation that felt more genuine and emotionally honest than any interaction we had had in years. Your father and I are getting older, and we don't want to spend whatever time we have left fighting with our daughter. Jake is doing well in college. Chloe is getting the help she needs, and we just want our family to be whole again. The apparent sincerity of her apology was compelling, especially because I genuinely missed having family relationships that weren't defined by conflict and manipulation. Despite everything that had happened, I still hoped that my parents might be capable of acknowledging my achievements and treating me with the respect and appreciation that successful children typically receive from their families. My grandmother's 82nd birthday provided the perfect opportunity for what seemed like a reconciliation. My parents invited me to attend the celebration, promising that there would be no discussion of money or past conflicts. They said the evening would focus entirely on celebrating my grandmother and bringing the family together for positive reasons. I decided to attend, partly because I genuinely wanted to see my grandmother, who had always been more supportive of my achievements than my parents, and partly because I hoped that time and perspective might have changed my family's attitude toward my success. Sarah had advised caution, but even she acknowledged that family relationships sometimes improve when people have time to gain perspective on their past behavior. The birthday celebration appeared to go well initially. My extended family was warm and welcoming. Many relatives expressed genuine pride in my professional achievements, and my parents seemed to be making an effort to focus on positive family interactions rather than past conflicts. My grandmother was thrilled to see me and spent much of the evening asking about my work and my life in New York. However, the evening's apparent success was masking a much more sinister plan that my immediate family had been developing for months. Chloe, who was attending the party as part of a pre-trial release agreement, had been secretly recording our conversations throughout the evening using a small recording device that I later learned my parents had purchased specifically for this purpose. The recordings were designed to capture statements that could be taken out of context and used to support a legal claim that I had verbally promised to provide financial support for various family members. Chloe had been coached to ask leading questions that might elicit responses that could be interpreted as commitments to pay for Jake's remaining college expenses, help with my parents' mortgage payments, or contribute to family medical bills. For example, when Chloe mentioned that Jake was struggling with the financial stress of college, I responded with general expressions of sympathy and support, saying things like, "I hope everything works out for him, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help." These normal expressions of family concern were being recorded with the intention of presenting them as specific promises to provide financial assistance. The true scope of their plan became clear 3 weeks after the birthday celebration, when I received a certified letter from an attorney claiming to represent my parents and Jake. The letter alleged that I had made verbal commitments during the birthday party to provide substantial financial assistance to various family members, and that my failure to follow through on these commitments constituted breach of oral, contract, and infliction of emotional distress. But the legal claims were only the beginning of what turned out to be an elaborate fraud scheme designed to gain ownership of my penthouse apartment. The attorney's letter was accompanied by documents claiming to show that my parents had provided the down payment for my penthouse purchase and that the property had always been intended as a joint family investment rather than my personal residence. The forged documents were sophisticated, including fake bank records showing transfers from my parents' account to mine, modified real estate contracts listing them as co-purchasers, and altered title documents indicating joint ownership of the property. The forgeries were convincing enough that a casual review might not have revealed their fraudulent nature, suggesting that my family had invested significant time and money in creating them. The legal strategy appeared to be based on the assumption that I would settle the claims out of court rather than risk the negative publicity and professional damage that would result from a protracted legal battle with my own family. The attorney's letter suggested that a payment of $1.2 million would resolve all claims and allow the family to move forward in a positive direction. The amount they were demanding represented not just a substantial portion of my net worth, but also a recognition that they had been carefully tracking my financial success and calculating exactly how much money they thought they could extract from me. The precision of the demand suggested months of planning and coordination among family members who had been pretending to seek reconciliation while actually preparing for the most sophisticated attack on my financial security they had yet attempted. The discovery that the birthday celebration had been an elaborate setup designed to create evidence for fraudulent legal claims was devastating on a personal level. The apparent warmth and reconciliation I had experienced that evening had been entirely fabricated, performed for the purpose of gathering evidence that could be used to steal my property and savings. My grandmother, who I later learned had been kept unaware of the recording scheme, had been used as an unwitting accomplice in their plan to manipulate my emotions and lower my guard. The conversation I had with her about my work and achievements, which had felt like genuine family pride and interest, had been orchestrated by my parents to create opportunities for the recorded conversations they were planning to use against me. The legal battle that followed would prove to be the most challenging period of my professional life, requiring enormous amounts of time, energy, and money to defend against claims that threatened not just my financial security but my reputation and career. But it also marked the moment when I decided to stop responding defensively to my family's attacks and began planning a comprehensive counteroffensive that would expose their criminal behavior and end their harassment permanently. The stakes of the conflict had escalated beyond anything I had imagined possible. My family was no longer simply trying to pressure me into providing financial support. They were attempting to steal property worth nearly $3 million through fraud and forgery. The birthday celebration scheme demonstrated a level of premeditation and sophisticated planning that indicated they viewed me as an adversary to be defeated rather than a family member to be loved and supported. The legal nightmare that followed my family's fraudulent claims consumed every aspect of my life for the better part of 18 months. Their lawyer, who turned out to be my cousin's husband and had access to extensive family information, filed multiple lawsuits simultaneously, creating a complex web of legal challenges that required constant attention from my legal team and significant time away from my professional responsibilities. The primary lawsuit claimed that my parents held joint ownership of my penthouse based on their alleged financial contributions to the purchase. A secondary suit alleged that I had verbally promised to provide financial support for Jake's education and my parents' medical expenses, constituting binding oral contracts that I had breached. A third claim suggested that my refusal to honor these alleged commitments had caused intentional infliction of emotional distress that warranted substantial monetary damages. Each lawsuit required separate legal responses, discovery processes, and court appearances that were scheduled strategically to maximize disruption to my professional schedule. I was forced to miss important client meetings, postpone business trips, and delegate responsibilities that I would normally handle personally. The constant legal obligations were affecting my performance at work and creating concerns among colleagues about my ability to manage both my professional duties and personal legal challenges. The situation became significantly worse when local news outlets picked up the story of a young Wall Street executive being sued by her own family for abandoning them despite her wealth and success. The initial news coverage was superficial and sensationalized, focusing on the apparent conflict between family loyalty and personal greed, without investigating the complex history of manipulation and criminal behavior that had led to the legal battle. Headlines like, "Wall Street Success Story Refuses to Help Family and $1 Million Daughter Abandons Parents" appeared in local papers and online news sites, creating a narrative that portrayed me as a heartless person who had forgotten her family's sacrifices in pursuit of material success. The articles included quotes from my family's attorney about the emotional devastation my parents were experiencing and their desperate attempts to reconnect with their successful but distant daughter. The negative publicity had immediate professional consequences. Several clients expressed concerns about being associated with someone who appeared to be involved in a public family scandal. Two major accounts requested meetings to discuss whether the legal challenges might affect my ability to manage their investments effectively. My supervisor called me into his office to discuss the company's concerns about the reputational risks associated with the ongoing media coverage. "The quality of your work has remained excellent," he explained, during what felt like a disciplinary meeting, despite his diplomatic language. But when clients are reading news stories about their portfolio manager being sued by her family for abandoning them, it creates concerns about judgment and character that we need to address seriously. The meeting resulted in a decision to temporarily transfer my largest accounts to other managers while the legal situation was resolved. Although this was presented as a temporary measure designed to protect both me and the clients from negative publicity, it represented a significant blow to my career trajectory and earning potential. The transferred accounts included relationships I had built over several years, and there was no guarantee that they would be returned to me even if the legal challenges were eventually resolved in my favor. The financial cost of defending against multiple lawsuits was staggering. Legal fees were accumulating at a rate of $15,000 to $20,000 per month, and my attorneys estimated that the total cost of defending all the claims could reach several $100,000 before the cases were resolved. The money I had saved and invested over years of careful financial planning was being consumed by the need to defend myself against fraudulent claims filed by my own family. More troubling was the discovery that my family's legal strategy was designed to exploit every possible technicality and procedural opportunity to extend the litigation as long as possible. They were not seeking a quick resolution but rather hoping that the accumulated stress, expense, and professional damage would eventually force me to settle their claims regardless of their merit. Their attorney filed motion after motion requesting documents, depositions, and evidence that required enormous amounts of time to compile and present. Each request was technically legitimate but clearly designed to maximize the burden on my time and legal expenses. They demanded financial records going back 7 years, employment evaluations, personal correspondence, and even medical records that they claimed were relevant to their emotional distress claims. The discovery process revealed that my family had been collecting information about my financial situation for years, maintaining detailed records of my promotions, salary increases, property purchases, and investment activities. They had screenshots of my social media posts, copies of articles mentioning my professional achievements, and even photographs of my apartment taken without my knowledge during family visits. The systematic nature of their information gathering indicated that their current legal attack was not a spontaneous response to recent conflicts, but rather the culmination of years of planning and preparation. They had been building a case against me long before our relationships had deteriorated to the point of open conflict, suggesting that they had always viewed my success as something they were entitled to share rather than something I had earned independently. The stress of managing constant legal challenges while maintaining my professional responsibilities was taking a severe toll on my physical and mental health. I was sleeping 4 to 5 hours per night, dealing with chronic headaches from stress, and experiencing anxiety attacks that sometimes required me to leave important meetings unexpectedly. My primary care physician recommended that I consider taking medical leave from work to focus on resolving the legal situation and recovering my health. The low point came during a particularly difficult week when I had to give a deposition in the morning, attend a crucial client presentation in the afternoon, and then participate in a conference call with my legal team in the evening to prepare for the next day's court hearing. The exhaustion and stress were so severe that I made several errors during the client presentation that resulted in losing a potential account worth several $1 million in managed assets. That evening, sitting alone in my penthouse apartment that had become the center of a legal battle threatening to consume everything I had worked to achieve, I seriously considered giving up the fight and paying my family's demands. The settlement they were seeking was substantial but not impossible for me to afford, and ending the litigation would allow me to focus on rebuilding my career and recovering my health. Diego found me that night sitting on my terrace, staring at the city lights and contemplating whether the cost of fighting my family's claims was worth the damage it was causing to every other aspect of my life. I had called him in desperation, needing to talk to someone who understood both the personal and professional stakes involved in my decision. "They're winning," I told him, describing the accumulated stress, expense, and professional damage that the legal battle was causing. "Even if I eventually prove that their claims are fraudulent, they've already accomplished what they wanted. They've disrupted my career, damaged my reputation, and forced me to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars defending myself against lies." Diego listened patiently as I outlined all the reasons why settling the case might be the rational choice, even though it would mean rewarding my family's criminal behavior and encouraging them to make similar demands in the future. He understood the appeal of ending the conflict and moving on with my life, but he also recognized that giving in to their demands would not actually end their harassment. "If you pay them now, they'll know that threatening your career and reputation is an effective way to control you," he said, helping me understand that settlement would not bring peace but would instead establish a pattern of successful extortion. "They'll be back in 2 years with new demands, and they'll use the same tactics because they'll know those tactics work." Sarah reached a similar conclusion when I consulted with her about the possibility of settlement. Her experience with family financial abuse had taught her that giving in to extortion demands typically escalates rather than resolves the underlying problem, because it demonstrates that the tactics being used are effective and should be continued. "I know this is destroying your life right now," Sarah said during a weekend call when I was seriously considering capitulation. "But if you settle these claims, you'll be dealing with similar demands for the rest of your career. They'll never see you as anything other than a source of money to be exploited whenever they need funds." Both Sarah and Diego helped me recognize that the current legal battle was not just about defending my current assets, but about establishing whether I would be allowed to enjoy the success I had earned without being constantly victimized by family members who felt entitled to control my financial resources. That realization marked the turning point in my approach to the conflict. Instead of continuing to respond defensively to their attacks, I decided to begin investigating their financial behavior and looking for evidence of the crimes I suspected they had committed against me over the years. If they were determined to wage a legal war against me, I would stop fighting defensively and begin mounting my own offensive campaign designed to expose their criminal behavior and end their harassment permanently. The decision to shift from defensive to offensive tactics marked the beginning of a comprehensive investigation into my family's financial behavior that would uncover crimes far more extensive than I had initially suspected. Working with a forensic accountant recommended by Sarah, I began systematically examining my financial history for evidence of identity theft, fraud, and unauthorized use of my personal information. The forensic investigation revealed that my family's criminal activities against me had begun much earlier than Chloe's credit card fraud. Bank records showed that my parents had been using my social security number to open utility accounts since I was 16 years old, building a credit history in my name without my knowledge or consent. These early accounts had been managed responsibly, creating positive credit history that they later used to support more serious fraud attempts. More shocking was the discovery that my father had taken out student loans in my name during my college years, beyond the loans I had knowingly applied for to cover my education expenses. The unauthorized loans totaled nearly $40,000 and had been deposited into accounts controlled by my parents rather than being used for my educational expenses. The money had apparently been used to fund Jake's expensive baseball training and equipment costs during his high school years. The forensic accountant's report documented a 15-year pattern of identity theft and financial fraud that had begun when I was still a minor and had continued through my college years and into my early career. My parents had treated my identity and credit history as family resources to be used for their own financial benefit, never intending to inform me of these activities or seek my consent for them. The most serious discovery was evidence that my parents had attempted to refinance their home mortgage using my income and credit history as collateral, without my knowledge or consent. The attempted refinancing had failed because the mortgage company's verification process had revealed discrepancies in the application, but the attempt itself constituted serious mortgage fraud that could have resulted in federal criminal charges. Armed with this evidence, my legal team filed a comprehensive countersuit alleging multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The criminal evidence was also reported to federal authorities, initiating a criminal investigation that would eventually result in charges against both my parents and Jake for their roles in the various fraud schemes. The civil countersuit sought not only the recovery of all money stolen through fraudulent loans and credit accounts but also punitive damages for the emotional distress and professional damage caused by their harassment campaign. The total amount sought was nearly $2 million, representing both actual damages and punitive awards designed to ensure that the crimes would not be financially profitable for my family. Simultaneously, I hired a public relations firm to help manage the media narrative that had been so damaging to my professional reputation. The PR team worked with my legal team to release information about the criminal investigation and the evidence of long-term financial abuse, shifting public perception from a story about family abandonment to a story about sophisticated financial crimes committed against a successful young woman. The media strategy was carefully coordinated to maximize the impact of each revelation while maintaining my privacy and professional dignity. Rather than granting interviews or making public statements, we provided documentation and evidence to investigative reporters who could examine the facts independently and draw their own conclusions about the true nature of the family conflict. The first major media breakthrough came when a financial journalist at the Wall Street Journal obtained copies of the forensic accounting report and wrote a detailed article about family financial abuse targeting successful young professionals. The article used my case as the primary example but also included interviews with other professionals who had experienced similar exploitation by family members who felt entitled to share in their success. The journal article was followed by features in other major publications, including Fortune magazine and Bloomberg News, that examined the broader phenomenon of family financial abuse and the challenges faced by young professionals whose success creates unrealistic expectations among family members. The coverage portrayed me as a victim of sophisticated financial crimes rather than as an ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her family. The shift in media narrative had immediate positive effects on my professional situation. Clients who had expressed concerns about the initial negative publicity reached out to express support and apologize for any doubts they had harbored about my character. Several colleagues who had maintained distance during the height of the negative coverage began inviting me to social and professional events again. Most importantly, my supervisor called me into his office to discuss returning the accounts that had been temporarily transferred to other managers. The company had conducted its own investigation into the media coverage and the legal situation, and they were satisfied that I was the victim of criminal harassment rather than someone whose judgment or character was questionable. "We should have done more to investigate the situation before making any changes to your responsibilities," he admitted during what felt like an apology meeting. "The evidence that's come to light makes it clear that you were dealing with a sophisticated criminal conspiracy, not a family dispute about money. We want to restore your full responsibilities and make sure this situation doesn't continue to affect your career here." While the media and professional rehabilitation was gratifying, The most satisfying aspect of the counteroffensive was watching my family's legal strategy collapse as the evidence of their crimes became public. Their attorney, who had filed the original lawsuits with such confidence, began seeking settlement discussions as it became clear that his clients were facing serious criminal charges rather than simply pursuing civil claims. Jake was the first family member to break under the pressure of the criminal investigation. When federal agents interviewed him about his role in the student loan fraud and the attempted mortgage refinancing, he admitted to his participation and provided detailed information about his parents' other criminal activities in exchange for a more lenient plea agreement. His confession revealed that the family's attacks on me had been coordinated and planned for years, with regular family meetings devoted to discussing new strategies for accessing my financial resources. Jake described conversations where my parents had discussed forging documents, creating false emergency situations, and even explored the possibility of having me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain control of my assets through guardianship proceedings. The systematic and premeditated nature of their crimes was shocking even to the investigators who had seen similar cases. The level of planning and coordination indicated that my family had essentially operated as a criminal conspiracy dedicated to stealing my identity and exploiting my financial success for their own benefit. Chloe, who was already facing charges for her earlier identity theft, accepted a plea agreement that required her to provide additional evidence about the family's criminal activities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her cooperation revealed details about how they had obtained personal information, coordinated their stories, and planned their various fraud attempts over the years. The evidence provided by Jake and Chloe supported additional criminal charges against my parents for conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. The federal investigation expanded to include their tax returns, business records, and financial transactions going back 10 years, uncovering additional evidence of financial crimes that extended beyond their activities targeting me. As the criminal case developed, their civil lawsuits against me became increasingly untenable. The forged documents they had submitted as evidence of joint ownership of my penthouse were now evidence of criminal fraud. The recordings they had made during the birthday celebration were inadmissible because they had been obtained through deception and misrepresentation. Their attorney withdrew from representing them when it became clear that continuing the civil litigation would require him to present evidence he knew was fraudulent, potentially exposing him to professional sanctions and criminal charges. Without legal representation, my parents were forced to represent themselves in both the civil and criminal proceedings, a situation that quickly became overwhelming for them. The final collapse of their legal strategy came when the judge in the civil case dismissed all their claims with prejudice, ruling that the evidence clearly showed their allegations were fraudulent and that their lawsuits constituted an abuse of the legal system. The dismissal included an order requiring them to pay my legal fees and court costs, adding financial consequences to the criminal charges they were already facing. The investigation and counteroffensive had taken nearly a year to complete, but the results were comprehensive and decisive. My family's criminal behavior had been exposed and documented, their civil claims had been dismissed, and they were facing serious legal consequences for their crimes. The media coverage had shifted from portraying me as an ungrateful daughter to recognizing me as the victim of sophisticated financial crimes. Most importantly, the counteroffensive had established clear legal and social boundaries that would prevent future harassment or exploitation attempts. The criminal convictions and civil judgments created a documented record of their behavior that would make any future claims against me legally and practically impossible to pursue. The culmination of the legal battle came 18 months after I had first decided to fight back against my family's criminal conspiracy. The federal court proceedings resulted in criminal convictions for all 3 family members involved in the fraud schemes, with sentences ranging from probation and restitution for Jake to actual prison time for my parents, who were identified as the organizers of the conspiracy. My father was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for identity theft, mail fraud, and conspiracy, while my mother received 18 months for her role in the document forgery and student loan fraud. Jake's cooperation with the investigation earned him a probation sentence, but he was required to pay restitution for his participation in the unauthorized loans and mortgage fraud attempt. Chloe's sentence was enhanced because of her previous identity theft conviction, resulting in 3 years in prison and an order to pay full restitution for all the fraudulent credit accounts she had opened in my name. The judge specifically noted that her crimes represented a serious breach of family trust and demonstrated a pattern of financial predation that warranted significant punishment. The civil proceedings resulted in judgments totaling nearly $1.8 million in actual damages, punitive awards, and attorney fees. While I knew that collecting the full amount would be difficult given my family's limited financial resources, the judgments established a legal record of their criminal behavior and provided mechanisms for garnishing any future income they might earn. More significantly, the legal victory coincided with a major professional milestone that validated all the sacrifices I had made to build my career. Goldman Sachs promoted me to senior managing director, making me one of the youngest people in the firm's history to reach that level. The promotion came with a substantial increase in compensation and recognition as one of the company's rising stars in alternative investments. The timing was particularly satisfying because it demonstrated that my family's attempts to damage my career had ultimately failed. Despite their best efforts to sabotage my professional reputation and distract me from my work responsibilities, I had continued to excel in my field and achieve new levels of success. The promotion was announced the same week that I decided to sell my penthouse apartment, a decision that felt symbolic of closing the chapter on my family's attempts to claim ownership of my achievements. The sale was handled discreetly through a private broker, but the final price of $2.8 million was reported in real estate publications as an example of the strong market for luxury properties in Manhattan. The sale price represented a gain of $1 million over my purchase price just 4 years earlier, vindication of my investment strategy and financial acumen. But more importantly, the sale allowed me to reinvest in properties and business opportunities that my family had no connection to or knowledge of, ensuring that future success would be completely protected from their interference. The news of the sale, combined with reports about my promotion, created a media narrative that was the complete opposite of the story my family had tried to create about my character and values. Instead of being portrayed as someone who had abandoned her family in pursuit of wealth, I was now recognized as a successful professional who had overcome criminal harassment and family abuse to achieve remarkable career success. The penthouse sale made headlines in several major business publications, not because of the price, but because of the broader story it represented about young professionals breaking free from family financial abuse and building independent success. The coverage included interviews with other professionals who had faced similar challenges and had overcome family exploitation to achieve their goals. My family's response to these developments was exactly what I had expected based on their previous behavior. Instead of accepting responsibility for their crimes or acknowledging the harm they had caused, they attempted one final manipulation, designed to guilt me into providing assistance despite their criminal convictions. The attempt came in the form of a letter from my mother, written from prison, claiming that my father was experiencing serious health problems that required expensive medical treatment not available in federal prison. The letter pleaded with me to use my substantial resources to hire private attorneys who could appeal their convictions or secure early release for medical reasons. The letter was accompanied by what appeared to be medical documents describing my father's condition, but my experience with their previous fraudulent medical claims made me immediately suspicious of the documents' authenticity. A quick consultation with my attorney confirmed that the medical records contained several obvious forgeries and that my father's actual health, according to prison medical staff, was normal for someone his age. The discovery that they were still attempting to manipulate me through fraudulent medical claims, even while serving prison sentences for previous fraud, demonstrated that their criminal behavior was not the result of desperation or temporary poor judgment, but rather a fundamental aspect of their character and relationship with me. My response to their final manipulation attempt was swift and decisive. I forwarded the fraudulent medical documents to federal prosecutors as evidence of additional criminal activity, resulting in new charges for mail fraud and conspiracy that extended my parents' prison sentences and eliminated any possibility of early release. The incident also provided an opportunity to obtain a permanent restraining order that legally prohibited any member of my immediate family from contacting me directly or indirectly for any reason. The restraining order included provisions preventing them from approaching my workplace, contacting my colleagues or clients, or attempting to communicate through intermediaries. The legal protections I had established were comprehensive and enforceable, but the most satisfying aspect of my victory was the recognition I received from the broader professional and social community. I was invited to speak at conferences about family financial abuse, consulted by other young professionals facing similar challenges, and recognized as an advocate for victims of family exploitation. The speaking engagements and advocacy work provided opportunities to help other people navigate similar situations while also establishing my expertise in an area that affected thousands of successful professionals. The work was personally fulfilling because it transformed my negative experiences into resources that could help other people protect themselves from family financial predators. My professional success continued to accelerate following the resolution of the legal battle. Without the constant distraction and stress of family harassment, I was able to focus entirely on building my career and investment portfolio. Within 2 years of the criminal convictions, my net worth had grown to over $5 million, and I was managing investment portfolios worth more than $50 million for the firm's most prestigious clients. The extended family members who had initially supported my parents' claims gradually reached out to apologize as the truth about the criminal conspiracy became clear. Several aunts and uncles who had been misled by my parents' lies expressed genuine remorse for their initial reactions and asked for forgiveness for doubting my version of events. These reconciliations were gratifying because they restored relationships with family members who had been manipulated rather than being willing participants in the criminal conspiracy. However, I was careful to maintain appropriate boundaries and ensure that my renewed relationships with extended family could not be exploited by my immediate family members if they were ever released from prison. The most meaningful recognition came from Diego and Sarah, whose support during the darkest period of the conflict had been crucial to my survival and ultimate victory. Both had witnessed the full scope of my family's criminal behavior and understood the personal cost of fighting back against people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Their friendship and guidance had taught me that healthy relationships are based on mutual respect and support rather than exploitation and control. Their examples helped me understand the difference between family members who celebrate your success and those who try to claim ownership of your achievements. The years following my legal victory were devoted to healing from the trauma of family betrayal and building a life based on healthy relationships and authentic success. The process of recovery required extensive therapy to address the complex emotions surrounding the systematic abuse I had endured and the difficult decisions I had been forced to make to protect myself. Working with a therapist who specialized in family trauma helped me understand that the guilt I felt about my family's criminal convictions was not rational, but rather the result of years of conditioning that had taught me to prioritize their needs over my own well-being. The therapeutic process helped me recognize that their legal consequences were the result of their own choices and actions, not something I had caused by refusing to enable their criminal behavior. The healing process also involved building new traditions and relationships that could replace the family connections I had lost. Diego and Sarah became central figures in this chosen family, along with other friends and colleagues who demonstrated genuine care and support without expecting financial benefits in return. The contrast between my chosen family and my biological family was striking and instructive. The people who truly cared about my well-being celebrated my successes without expecting to benefit from them financially. They offered support during difficult times without demanding compensation for their assistance. They respected my boundaries and decisions without attempting to manipulate or control my behavior. These healthy relationships taught me what family support was supposed to look like and helped me understand why my biological family's behavior had been so damaging and abnormal. Real family members want to see you succeed and thrive independently. They don't view your achievements as resources to be exploited for their own benefit. My professional growth continued to accelerate as I channeled the energy I had previously devoted to family conflict into career development and business opportunities. I left Goldman Sachs to start my own investment firm, specializing in helping other young professionals build and protect their wealth from family financial predators. The new business was built around the lessons I had learned from my own experiences and the expertise I had developed in identifying and preventing family financial abuse. My clients included successful young professionals in technology, medicine, law, and finance who were dealing with family members who felt entitled to share in their success without contributing to their achievements. The work was personally fulfilling because it allowed me to transform my negative experiences into resources that could help other people protect themselves from exploitation. Each client I helped avoid family financial abuse represented a small victory against the kind of manipulation and control that had dominated my own family relationships for years. The business grew rapidly, partly because family financial abuse was more common than most people realized, and partly because my public speaking and advocacy work had established me as a recognized expert in the field. Within 3 years, the firm was managing over $100 million in assets for clients who valued both financial expertise and understanding of family manipulation dynamics. My personal life also flourished as I learned to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. I purchased a beautiful home in Westchester County, far from the Manhattan penthouse, that had become a symbol of my family's attempts to claim ownership of my success. The new property was entirely private, with no public records or media coverage that could attract unwanted attention from family members or other potential predators. The decision to move to a more private and secure environment was partly practical, protecting against future harassment attempts, but also symbolic of my commitment to building a life defined by my own choices rather than reactions to other people's manipulation. The new home became a space for entertaining friends, pursuing hobbies, and enjoying the success I had worked so hard to achieve. 4 years after my parents' criminal convictions, I received notification that they were being released from prison after serving their full sentences. The news created some anxiety about potential renewed harassment, but the legal protections I had established and the distance I had created made any contact attempts both illegal and impractical. Their release provided an opportunity to test my emotional healing and the strength of the boundaries I had established. When they attempted to contact me through intermediaries, claiming they wanted to apologize and rebuild our relationship, I was able to decline their overtures without guilt or second-guessing my decision. The attempted contact revealed that their fundamental attitude toward me had not changed despite their criminal convictions and prison sentences. The messages they sent through relatives continued to focus on their needs and problems, rather than acknowledging the harm they had caused me or taking responsibility for their criminal behavior. Their failure to demonstrate genuine remorse or understanding of their crimes confirmed that maintaining no contact was the appropriate choice for protecting my well-being and continued success. The people who had systematically exploited and betrayed me for decades were not capable of the kind of fundamental change that would be required for healthy family relationships. The final test of my emotional healing came when my grandmother passed away at 86, creating pressure from extended family members for me to attend the funeral and potentially reconcile with my immediate family. The decision was difficult because I had genuinely loved my grandmother and wanted to honor her memory appropriately. After consulting with my therapist and closest friends, I decided to attend the funeral but to maintain strict boundaries about interaction with my immediate family members. I arranged to attend the service itself but to skip the family gathering afterward, allowing me to pay respects to my grandmother without exposing myself to manipulation or harassment from people who had not changed their fundamental attitude toward me. The funeral provided closure and reinforced my understanding that protecting myself from family abuse was not selfish but necessary for maintaining the healthy life I had built. My grandmother would have wanted me to be safe and successful, not to sacrifice my well-being to maintain relationships with people who had caused me significant harm. The experience of attending the funeral without guilt or regret confirmed that I had successfully healed from the trauma of family betrayal and established a strong foundation for continued success and happiness. I was able to honor my grandmother's memory while protecting myself from people who continued to view me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be loved and respected. Looking back on the journey from that lonely graduation ceremony to my current success and emotional health, I recognize that the decision to fight back against my family's exploitation was one of the most important choices I have ever made. The process was painful and expensive, but it taught me valuable lessons about self-worth, healthy relationships, and the importance of protecting what you have worked to achieve. The most important lesson I learned is that family relationships, like all relationships, must be based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and manipulation. Real family members want to see you succeed and thrive independently. They celebrate your achievements without expecting to benefit from them financially. They offer support without demanding compensation or control in return. People who claim family status while exploiting your success, manipulating your emotions, or threatening your security are not behaving like family members regardless of their biological relationship to you. Protecting yourself from such people is not selfish or disloyal. It is necessary for maintaining your dignity, security, and ability to continue achieving your goals. My story demonstrates that it is possible to overcome even sophisticated family financial abuse and build a successful, fulfilling life based on healthy relationships and authentic achievement. The process requires courage, persistence, and often professional help, but the result is freedom from manipulation and the ability to enjoy the success you have earned. For anyone dealing with similar family exploitation, my advice is to document everything, seek professional help from attorneys and therapists who understand family financial abuse, and remember that you have the right to protect yourself from people who are harming you, regardless of their relationship to you. Success without the ability to enjoy it is not real success. Building wealth that can be claimed by family predators is not financial security. Achievements that make you a target for exploitation, rather than earning you respect and support, are hollow victories that will not provide lasting satisfaction. True success includes the ability to enjoy what you have earned, maintain relationships with people who genuinely care about your well-being, and build a life based on your own values and choices, rather than other people's expectations and demands. That kind of success is worth fighting for, even when the people you must fight are the ones who claim to love you most. Have you ever experienced family members who felt entitled to your success or tried to guilt you into financial support you didn't want to provide? Share your experiences in the comments below because you're not alone in dealing with these challenging family dynamics. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about building success while protecting yourself from exploitation. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar family pressures because sometimes knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that you have the right to protect the success you've earned and build the life you deserve, regardless of what anyone else thinks you owe them. Stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that your achievements belong to anyone other than yourself.